Well, we'll talk about getting the water out of the cylinders on the engine, because the water is not compressible. And if we start up the engine without the cylinder cocks open and we put enough pressure in there, that water won't compress and it'll break something. And we'll talk about that later, because that's the main thing to remember, that water is not compressible at all. And consequently, it has no tendency to expand when the pressure is removed. Hot water, however, if hotter than 212 degrees Fahrenheit, has a certain amount of explosive energy depending upon the pressure and the corresponding temperatures, because the heat that is contained above 212 degrees will, in the case of an explosion, turn a large amount of the water into steam, which of course has a tendency to expand. The amount of energy in 1 pound of water at 150 pounds pressure, which might be set free by explosion, is shown in column 3 of the company tables to be 11,823 foot-pounds. In 3,240 pounds of water, that's how much is in this boiler, there are 11,823 times 3,240, or 38,307,816 foot-pounds of energy, which is stored in that boiler. Now, isn't that something? That's how much energy is stored in that boiler. It's 38,307,816 foot-pounds of energy potentially stored in that 25-horse boiler, which adds to the energy in steam, makes a total of 39,616,703 foot-pounds of energy stored within the walls of the boiler, which would be set free to destructive work in the case of an explosion. Now, what they're talking about, when that water is in there under pressure, all this water that's in the boiler, and about 2/3 of the space is water, what they're talking about, under pressure, that remains in there is water. But at the temperature, say, 337 degrees at 100 pounds and 365 at 150, if the boiler would erupt, the atmospheric pressure, all that water, a big percentage of that water would turn to steam. And I just told you that 1 cubic inch of water expanded 1,641 times, I believe. It says if this energy could all be applied as power is in a rifle to shoot a ball weighing 1 pound vertically in the air, it would be sufficient to hurl such a missile the almost incredible distance of 39,616,703 feet, almost 7,500 miles. A ball traveling with velocity enough to go so far would undoubtedly pass beyond the Earth's atmospheric force and would forever afterwards circle through space as a meter. Now, I think us guys, we can understand that in this space age. But I wonder if the old boys back there in 1910 and back in there, they probably couldn't comprehend that. Of course, we can, kind of. In order to get a still clearer idea of what such tremendous amount of energy means, we would see what would happen if, instead of applying the power to a ball weighing only 1 pound, we applied it to the same weight to the whole engine weighing, as before stated, 22,830 pounds. They're going to apply the power to the weight of the entire engine, which is 22,830 pounds. A little calculation shows that it would leave the Earth with a velocity of 384 feet per second and rise to a height of 1,735 feet, almost 1/3 of a mile. Well, anyway, that just gives you some idea of the power that's stored in the steam inside of that boiler. And then again, I just wanted to emphasize that one of the reasons that we have this school is to promote safety. And so if you know and understand that engine, in that boiler, you'll be a safer and a better engineer. And the other thing, before we get into the slides here and start studying the construction of the boiler, that I want to say, you know, you guys go out here, we can take most anybody out here on a modern tractor, and if they got a little mechanical ability and they've probably already been driving a car or something, we can have them driving that tractor in a very short period of time. And they probably do pretty good if you keep them away from the fence row particularly. My main problem I have going down along the fence, sometimes I get to daydreaming about steam engines, and one day I hooked a tree. But that tractor, also when it breaks down, you probably call John Deere or whoever your other service rep to come out and fix it. When the load comes on, all of a sudden, the governor automatically takes care of it. About all you got to do is be sure that the fluid levels are up in the tractor, and everything is just automatically taken care of. But in the steam engine, it isn't that way. You've got to run that engine. Old Big Mac used to talk about the diesel when they come with the diesels on the railroad and the old steam locomotive. And anyway, he said whenever you ran a steam engine, a steam locomotive, you knew you was running an engine. He said running a diesel, there was absolutely no thrill to it. It's just like running a streetcar. But you've got to know how to run this engine. And Cecil Kelly used to say you've got to anticipate, and as you learn, well, you'll find that out on the firing of it and the entire operation of the engine. And for you to be a complete engineer, you need to completely understand your engine. You need to be able to make the adjustments of it. You need to be able to handle and operate the engine. You need to be able to belt the engine. You need to be able to fire the engine under load. And just a lot of things that a lot of the engineers, even today, are not able to do. But you guys can, and as you stay here tonight, and we do get to see the video, well, you'll see here at our steam schools how well some of them done. Okay, I believe we'll get the slide projector going here. Is the Fort Huron Longfellow. And this kind of just an example of, you know, in the old steam thrasher catalogs, back there particularly in the early 1900s, you get to see the catalogs of most all the companies. Some of them with just a beautiful cover on the catalogs. And this is one, and of course the Fort Huron, one of the reasons I think in order to enjoy the hobby, you need to know a lot of the stories and things, and people, the old steam thrashermen, they talk about this advantage to their engine and another advantage for another engine. Fort Huron always bragged about their wheel, and they even put it there in the catalog, and I always thought that was a pretty picture. Okay, Kenny. We will talk about the different types of boilers, and we're only going to talk about the types of boilers that apply to the traction engines that we run. Now this engine here is a Lyman Napso Canton monitor. Lyman got it in 1950. He got it restored and brought it here to Pawnee. It was in the, I guess, the early 80s, I believe. And the first time we fired that up, I don't think there was a human living that had ever seen one run and operate. There's only one other one in existence, and it's not in operating condition. One of the things, you know, they always tell me if everything else fails, read the instructions. Well, if you notice there, I'm reading the instructions. And what happened there, we will get into the boiler feed, different types of boiler feed water systems. But on this old engine, my dad was an old timer. He was born in 1885. He grew up in Missouri in the sawmills. And back at that time, they had what they called a Hancock inspirator on a lot of the old sawmill boilers. And Dad always wanted one of them, and there in the 40s, we advertised for one, and we bought one. It just like new. Well, Lyman and I decided to put it on this engine, just for novelty. But we had no idea how to work it. Well, I've seen a lot of steam traction engines all over, and I had never seen one on an engine. And I happened to get up on Frank Hyman's 60-horse case a few years ago, and by gosh, there was a Hancock inspirator on it. And I asked Frank, I said, how in the world do you work that? And he said, you know, he said, I put that on there and I turned them valves every way you could turn them, and I couldn't make it work. And he said, old Prostroud had the instruction sheet on that. And so that's what I'm doing there, is reading the instructions on that Hancock inspirator. That same year, we took the Canton to Mount Pleasant Highway, and there's over 100 steam traction engines at Mount Pleasant. There was not one engineer who knew how to work it. And believe it or not, if I had to start it today, I doubt if I could either, because I forgot. I haven't worked it in a few years. But this boiler here is what we call a vertical boiler. Now, the boilers that we use in our old steam traction engines, we call it a fire tube boiler, and that means the fire goes up through the flues in the boiler. And of course, we'll see the flues and the firebox and all here in a minute. But this is a vertical boiler. They really wasn't very efficient, but they had certain advantages. And of course, one we'll be talking a lot about is the water over the crown sheet. And of course, this vertical boiler, the engine can be tipped one way or the other, and it didn't bother you at all. This old engine here was made in 1893, and in some ways I said it was obsolete when it was built. But in another way, it really wasn't. It had two speeds, which very few of our engines have two speeds. And I could see that it would actually go out and do some work. And before we go on any farther, I wanted to make the point that other steam engines, I don't know of a steam engine of any make that was a complete failure, the old traction engines. The ones that were sold to the farmer, the thrasherman, they went out, and if they were used for the purpose that the manufacturer built, they would get the job done. A lot of guys say, well, which one engine was the best? I don't think there was such a thing as the best. They were all good, and if they were used for what the purpose that the manufacturer built them, why, they would get the job done. Now, the early day tractor wasn't that way. Some of them was a complete failure, absolutely 100%, no good whatsoever. A lot of the articles that I've written, if you guys read them, you'd probably think there wasn't anything but a case. Well, the reason I've written some of them articles, there's always somebody that like to jump on the case, so I defend it, and a case engine is fairly easy to defend on paper, or if you want to get in a contest, either one. But the other engines are just as good, and some are better. And an old fellow in South Dakota once told me, he said, he said, every one of these old engines got a personality of their own, and I think that probably describes it pretty well. Okay. Well, it's just another engine of the old Canton. Just move on, Kenny. Now, this is the type of engine that most of us are used to more so, that we see around the show here. This is more of the standard type engine. Later, Ivan will be talking about engines. This particular engine is a Reeves. It's a double cylinder. A big part of our engine is only single cylinder. And of course, we'll get into compounds and cross compounds and what. But what we call the single simple and the double simple engine, why, that will be the ones that we will primarily study. Now, this type of boiler here is what we call a locomotive boiler. It's a fire tube boiler, and it's the locomotive style boiler, and it's the one that we'll be studying more than any other type of boiler. Okay. Now we get into return flue. This is another very popular type of boiler that was used. This engine here is a Huber. As far as I know, Huber never built any engine except a return flue. A lot of companies built a lot of different styles of engines that they offered to their customers. but Huber only built a return flue engine. Some companies built double cylinders, single cylinders,